Hey, everybody. So, for those of you who are interested in this spy world thing that I have somehow found my way into for almost 4 years, I want to share something that just happened that relates to it. There's so many details; it's hard to keep up with them. Fortunately, I'm a Virgo and I'm a good documenter, and I have documented hundreds, over 300 examples of the way in which this game is played. Um, But one of the ways the game has been played most frequently with me in the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, maybe a little longer, is I do these personal sessions. I've been doing them for years. I call them sacred purpose or soul shaping sessions, although lately I've been sort of calling them encoding sessions. But I really like doing them. I always have. And what started to happen is people who are involved in the situation, let's just say, started to book or somebody paid for them to book sessions with me. And the purpose of the sessions, although they would present a story, what it was that they were wanting to focus on, and I would do my best to meet their need and talk it through with them. It became very evident at some point that a number of these people were not people in the normal swirl of my work, let's say, people who had supported my work for years, people who I'd supported for years. They were there for a different reason, and it happened enough for me to come to this reasonable conclusion. Um, and the purpose was to utilize the session because I'm kind of stuck there for an hour. Um, to sort of bring up various words or terms woven interestingly into their story, like vile smear campaign. Stare at Jeff Brown for a moment and pause. Um, Various things that they wanted to let me know were going to happen to me, essentially, if I brought my story public. Um, and there have been endless examples of this. For example, not that long ago, a well-known guy who worked at CBC in Canada, a retired journalist, found a way to get me to sit down and have a coffee with him. First person in my town who 5 years who would ask me to have a coffee with him. And we found our way to my story, and he stopped and looked me deeply in the eyes and said, "It doesn't go well for whistleblowers." Long pause, because they're not in the circle of power. Long pause. Soon thereafter, and this was actually interestingly the day that I was going to pick up the edit of the book that I've written. Um, I'm not committed to publishing it to this point, but I did write it. My politically inspired memoir, and no doubt they knew where I was going and what I was going to pick up. And not that long afterwards, I put up a post about my politically inspired memoir, and soon thereafter, somebody else in the town called me, who I vaguely knew, to just let me know, made up some sort of story about their family situation. I could tell it was all constructed, and then said, "Well, let me know that their wife works in the courts and the jails." This is a common theme. And then very quickly segue to, "Oh, by the way, are you planning to publish that politically inspired memoir?" So that's how it goes. So this session in particular, I just had this session recently. It was interesting because I kind of caught the person more literally, and it's sort of a petty satisfaction, I suppose, after all of this nonsense. But person, I can almost tell sometimes from the people who are booking if they're connected, if someone's paying them to do the session with me, or if they're just sort of political activists as opposed to political operatives. But this person said, they had were reading my book, say, Grounded Spirituality, and it was helpful to them. They were just wanted to talk to me because it had helped them because they had been part of sort of the New Age world. So, they're doing the session, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't think this person read Grounded. It's reading Grounded. So I said, can you, what were you resonating with? Give me some examples so I understand what in that book. I covered so much ground. What was resonating? And this person, just happens to grab their phone and has a couple of excerpts there, which no doubt whoever it is that's paying for this knows Jeff Brown's mind, and he knows he's going to ask, so they prep it, and there's already a couple of screenshots on there. There's no book there, but there's screenshots. So the person reads it, and you can almost kind of tell from the way they're reading it, they've never read it before. So a few minutes later, I say, what was the name of the main character that I was talking to in the dialogues in that book? And they look stunned. They hadn't expected that question. So they said, I think it begins with look over at their phone, an M, but I can't remember the name. So of course this makes perfect sense. The person's name is Michael. But because in the grounded spirituality text, because the dialogue went on for hundreds of pages, I just used the letter M. So that's the game. This is a very obvious example of the game. And of course, there are many, many more examples of that, and hundreds of other examples of the game. But what's interesting about this, you would say, why, if they don't want Jeff Brown to publish this story or to reveal the whole story, why do they keep pushing him and triggering him and keeping him in the story? Because this is all part of the story now. And I hearken back to a conversation I had. This is where it gets interesting, this spy world that I know nothing about, at least until now. Now I could write a whole shitload of spy books, including techno-terrorism, which is a huge part of the spy world. Now what's going on in social media is a much bigger part of it than just the in-person or vehicular harassment or friends at libraries that are actually operatives, all that stuff. I've experienced all of these things in very literal and tangible ways. But techno-terrorism is the game, the online world. And I have a definition of it on Urban Dictionary, techno-terrorism, if you're interested. I thought even if I never can tell the story, at least I can get one useful definition out of this. Anyway, last spring of 23, a prominent Toronto journalist set up an introduction at a wine bar for me, him, and a very prominent litigator in Canada who sues CSIS and the RCMP. He's a very high-level guy, very jolly guy. And he knew some of my story, and he said, he'd read some federal court documents, and I think the journalist had shared some details, and he said, you really need to take seriously that you can't fly over Russia or China. And I'm like, what do you mean? If I'm going to go to Bali, I got to fly over Russia and China. But no, he really meant it. And it wasn't because they were going to take my plane down. It was more because they were going to find a way to have the plane have to land so they could gain access to my compromat if they had some understanding that I'm in this experience. And that is really how that world works. They're all trying to gather information. The whole thing is spun out on the gathering of information and compromat in every direction. And back then I just thought, this is silly, but I'm trying to take him seriously. But now as I sort of try to make sense of who's doing this, like a number of prominent people have told me who's behind this. But at the same time, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Because why would you continue to activate the person if you want them to let something go? And now I wonder, based on my conversations with him and a few other conversations, who this is, or if there's a number of different characters and motivations at play, including people who are getting paid to do all of these things in order to keep this alive because they want to push me to tell the story. It's obviously an exhausting thing to have to deal with or think about. Both Susan and I did experience medical calamities arising from this. And it doesn't go away. You just go look on my business page on Facebook for the shadow ban portion of this. There was 543,000 people on that page. It was growing quickly, and now it's down to 538. That never happened before. And if you go on my personal Facebook page, you can see some of them sometimes. They're not bots, but there's been the bots, thousands of bots, emails. At some point, I cleared 150 or 160,000 bot emails off of the enrollment website. But they're people with pictures and names. They may not really be that person with that picture and that name. In fact, there may be 15 of them on one particular post on the personal page that are all the same person who just is paid to construct fake profiles. Sometimes, if you're very savvy, you'll even be able to catch them interacting with themselves. When you catch them, this is the problem with being relatively intelligent, um, is they language things in almost exactly the same way. It's all part of the little game they play. But the sad part of it is, apart from the fact that it's sad, is that I like doing sessions with real people. I mean, people who were there because they want to have a conversation with me about purpose and encodings and soul shaping and all those things. And and I guess I'm sharing this because I mean, there's so much to share, but it helps me in the isolate. I mean, the whole game is to isolate, to make everyone leave you, to disconnect from you, compassion fatigue, all those things. It helps me to bridge back to humanity with some part of this horrific experience. I'm obviously sharing like 1/100,000th of it. But even that makes me feel a little bit more like I exist again because somebody's holding this information while I'm in the heart of this terrible experience. And so if you can hold it, I'm very grateful, thankful for that. And now, if you're interested, you have a little bit of an understanding of the fucking spy world, which is all about indirect communication. Let me give you one more example. The lawyer I told you that I met with journalist, soon thereafter, and I think it's probably still up on the page or whatever, I have screenshots of it. A fake page was created with my picture, just like on my personal profile page on Facebook. It's my picture. Except the name on it wasn't Jeff Brown. It was the name of the lawyer spelled backwards. So if the name of the lawyer was John Smith, it was Smith John, right? And they're obviously, that communication is not for anybody else on the page. Nobody else would know what the fuck is happening. But I know, because after 4 years of this, I know that the heart of the game is to let you know that they're there, because that's the thing that makes people most uncomfortable. In that industry, it's called undermining or influencing your OODA loop. So they basically find whatever it is in your particular psyche that is triggering. So for me, it's that they're there. At this point, it doesn't affect me the same way that it used to, but it did. And that's what they do. And so if you look around on Meta, you want to get to know about this. Sometimes what you'll see is there'll be like people who call themselves something whistleblower. They're not whistleblowers. They're people probably in a catalog somewhere that various governments and various other entities hire to go onto the pages of potential whistleblowers to befriend them, to connect with them, to find out what they're going to do, and or to use triggering words in order to push them away from the edge of going public. That's just one tiny example of this world. I'm absolutely convinced there are catalogs of all kinds of characters. So basically, they just run whistleblower commentary all day long. And you just think, oh, it's a whistleblower, or it's just some not well person. And they will come on to the page sometimes, as will many of these fake characters. And they will accuse you of that which they want you to believe you'll be accused of if you go public. Paranoid. They'll say paranoid. Most people would be paranoid. I don't think I'm paranoid. I'm appropriately anxious, that's for sure. Or they'll say psychotic break. They use those terms. And often those will come off whistleblower pages. There's one in particular, I won't name her, who for a few years I was like, oh, I thought that was a real person who connected with me because I was in the heart of that kind of experience. No, this is a person who's paid to connect with me to look like they're also in the heart of the same experience. Welcome to the Devil's Playground.